Imagine being roasted by America's most beloved cartoon, and it hits so close to home, the world can't tell if it's comedy or a documentary.
By you just now, I pronounce you king and trophy queen. In the name of the Henry, the Hank, and the Holy Harry.
Oh! On a recent Sunday, The Simpsons took direct aim at Meghan Markle, and the parody wasn't just savage, it was devastatingly accurate. Within minutes, the animated Meghan, complete with vegan cupcakes, forced smiles, and self-promotional podcasts, became a viral sensation, sparking memes and fiery debates online. But what made this moment sting wasn't the humor. It was the unmistakable truth behind every joke. Instead of laughing it off, Meghan reportedly exploded privately, branding the episode sexist and disrespectful. Yet her anger only spotlighted the uncomfortable reality everyone already sensed. Meghan Markle's perfectly curated image was falling apart, and even cartoons could see right through it. But how exactly did Meghan Markle's carefully built media empire unravel so dramatically? To answer that, let's rewind to the ambitious Netflix series with Love Meghan. Marketed as a fusion of California charm, royal sparkle, and mindful cooking, it was supposed to redefine relatable television. Instead, it never even saw daylight. Netflix quietly shelved the project before a single episode aired, and insiders later revealed why. The series, they said, felt like attending a corporate seminar, meticulously produced, painfully polished, and utterly soulless. In other words, it was more TED Talk than comfort TV. And this pattern of high-profile launches turned sour quickly became Meghan's unfortunate signature. Next came the podcast Confessions of a Female Founder, an idea promising honest conversations, but delivering little more than an audio diary of Meghan's personal journey. Clips leaked from behind the scenes painted a less than flattering picture. Guests barely getting a word in as Meghan steered every discussion back to her own narrative, her struggles, her triumphs, her version of the truth. Producers reportedly described it as a never-ending LinkedIn post and a mirror disguised as a microphone. The show tanked, not due to lack of star power, but because people felt they'd heard it all before, and always about Meghan. But even before Confessions, there was the Spotify disaster known as Archetypes, another star-studded project that crumbled under its own weight. With a jaw-dropping $20 million deal, expectations were high. Yet, just 12 episodes later, the partnership imploded. Spotify executives, frustrated by the heavily scripted, overly produced format, reportedly clashed with Meghan over creative freedom. Translated from corporate speak, Spotify wanted genuine, relatable content. Meghan wanted meticulous control. Ultimately, audiences felt they were getting lectures, not conversations, and tuned out. So, when The Simpsons caricatured Meghan's self-obsession, they weren't just poking fun, they were pointing out what everyone else had already noticed. Her ventures weren't creative platforms, they were thinly disguised branding exercises. Meghan's reaction to the satirical jab raised even more eyebrows. She accused the show of sexism, hinting that she was unfairly targeted as a woman of color striving for empowerment. But critics swiftly countered her claims. Prominent feminist voices argued bluntly, feminism isn't immunity from criticism, especially when the content being defended is fundamentally weak. Meghan's habit of shielding herself with empowerment narratives and social justice rhetoric had worn thin. What once felt courageous began to look like deflection, creating fatigue among the very audiences she intended to inspire. Yet, perhaps Meghan's most significant struggle lies deeper, in the widening gap between the image she promotes and how audiences perceive her. Her repeated self-framing as misunderstood and victimized started to backfire, especially given her luxurious lifestyle. Viewers noted the contradictions, advocating empowerment while seemingly detached from reality, discussing hardships from the luxury of a designer kitchen. A tweet capturing public sentiment went viral, sarcastically summing her situation. She's cosplaying as oppressed while wearing a $3,000 blouse. Hollywood noticed too and began backing away. Insiders who once eagerly welcomed her pitches grew wary. Studio executives reportedly expressed frustration that every project centered excessively on Meghan's persona. "She's uncoachable," one producer told reporters, lamenting how a single constructive criticism could be perceived as a microaggression. Her brand became toxic. Producers didn't want to gamble on a predictable cycle of underperformance and victimhood narratives. Meanwhile, Meghan's once formidable public appeal took a nosedive. Approval ratings plummeted in both the UK and US, reflecting a broader exhaustion among audiences. They didn't dislike Meghan, they just didn't believe her anymore. The carefully curated emotional narratives began feeling rehearsed rather than real. Audiences craved genuine vulnerability. Meghan consistently delivered strategic vulnerability, more about her personal brand than personal truth. This growing skepticism crystallized around the iconic Oprah interview, initially seen as groundbreaking. Over time, audiences revisited its claims, noting inconsistencies and shifting timelines. Meghan's repeated insistence on her truth clashed with emerging contradictions, eroding public trust. Instead of sympathy, the Oprah moment eventually inspired suspicion, becoming emblematic of a broader authenticity crisis. Industry insiders describe Meghan's repetitive content as predictable, and in entertainment, predictability is career poison. Streaming services, once eager partners, began quietly pulling away. Her content no longer guaranteed engagement. Viewers clicked out of curiosity, but rarely stayed to finish. Her relentless self-focus had created an emotional vacuum where meaningful storytelling should have been. The failure wasn't a lack of resources or visibility, it was a lack of depth and genuine connection. Realizing this, Meghan's team quietly started planning a rebrand, aiming to pivot away from self-centric narratives. Ideas included documentaries highlighting other people's stories, potential collaborations, and even whispers about returning to acting. But the question lingered: would audiences follow? Trust, once shattered, is notoriously difficult to rebuild, especially when the break is as profound as Meghan's. For Meghan to regain credibility, critics argued she'd need to embrace humility and genuine openness, qualities her brand had historically lacked. It would mean relinquishing rigid narrative control, allowing authentic, messy, human storytelling to emerge organically. But insiders doubted her willingness or ability to pivot genuinely. Meghan reportedly viewed disagreement as disrespect, a perspective deeply embedded in her approach to media and branding. That tension casts a long shadow inside the Montecito mansion. Former staffers whisper that the Sussex household now splits its days between brainstorming new ventures and damage control briefings. Harry, once the eager co-pilot of Meghan's media crusade, is said to be questioning whether endless rebrands are alienating the very causes they hope to champion. One insider recalled a heated exchange in which Harry pleaded for something real, something that isn't about us for once. The moment encapsulates the crossroads they face. Continue doubling down on a self-centric formula, or pivot towards storytelling that places them in the background and lets substance shine. There is, however, a recovery playbook. One etched by public figures who nosedived in front of millions and somehow soared back even higher. Look at Robert Downey Jr. Before he wore the Iron Man suit, he was wearing handcuffs on the evening news. His salvation wasn't a viral hashtag, it was years of brutally honest interviews where he owned every relapse and every jail cell. Audiences didn't witness a redemption arc crafted by publicists. They watched a man rebuild himself, brick by bruised brick. Then there's Demi Lovato. Instead of letting tabloids control the narrative, they dragged the cameras into rehab and let viewers sit in on the trembling, the tears, and the terrifying relapses. That rawness, unfiltered, unairbrushed, sparked a loyalty no polished rollout could ever buy. The common denominator in both journeys isn't flawless PR, it's vulnerability that feels lived in rather than lacquered, a willingness to stumble in the spotlight so others can see the bruises heal. For Meghan, that means trading the flawless Sussex aesthetic for the unvarnished messiness of real dialogue. Imagine a roundtable where she invites activists, critics, and even estranged relatives, asks the hard questions, and then, crucially, lets the silence hang long enough for uncomfortable answers to sting. Picture her quietly financing a docuseries she never appears in, save for a one-line credit at the end. Trading center stage for a back row seat is counterintuitive for a brand built on visibility, yet precisely that counter-move could reboot public curiosity. Until such a move happens, skepticism will remain her loudest critic. And at the moment, the critics are winning on volume. Yet insiders say the Duchess is buffered by a cozy ring of advisors who profit from perpetual noise. In that ecosystem, every headline, whether celebratory or scathing, converts into billable hours. Crisis PR retainers spike, speaking tour brokers snatch bigger venues, book agents float film rights packages at the first whiff of drama. When outrage equals income, who would dare whisper, "Maybe we should stay quiet this month"? Breaking that cycle requires more than swapping consultants. It demands an appetite for dissent. Meghan would need a war room where a designated devil's advocate can bluntly declare, "This idea won't land, and here's why," without being banished. Former staffers confess that even gently constructive feedback often ricocheted back as icy silence or, worse, a public narrative suggesting hidden bias. One ex-communications aide summarized the stalemate. "The problem isn't that people won't help her, it's that she won't trust anyone who isn't applauding." Such reflexive defensiveness doesn't just chill honest counsel, it feeds the very misfires that keep negative coverage churning. Recently, faint signals suggest the tide may be turning. In April 2025, Meghan quietly bankrolled the Silver Screen Sisters Fellowship, a scholarship for first-generation women filmmakers. There was no glossy teaser trailer, no professional photos of Meghan shaking scholarship winners' hands, just a footnote on the Archewell website, and a single line in Variety's back pages. The minimalist approach puzzled gossip columnists but impressed industry veterans. Applications poured in, quadrupling projections within a fortnight, prompting the foundation to double the number of grants on offer. The inaugural cohort, 10 directors from 6 countries, received more than tuition. Each fellow got a paid 3-month residency on an active set and a seasoned mentor in their chosen field. 24-year-old Nairobi documentarian Aisha Mwangi recounted in a Twitter thread, "They wired the money with a 5-word email. Go make your film, period. No branding package, no photo op, just trust." Film Twitter erupted in applause, noting that the low-key execution felt almost inverse to Meghan's usual spotlight strategies, and that, perhaps, was the point. Early signs are promising. One fellow's short about migrant mothers has already been shortlisted for the Venice Film Festival, while another documentary on microfinancing in rural India secured distribution before post-production wrapped. Critics have grudgingly acknowledged the program's authenticity, some admitting that this hands-off philanthropy could be the first brick in rebuilding public trust, provided Meghan resists the familiar urge to pivot the fellowship into a self-congratulatory content vehicle. Goodwill, however, is fragile. A single tone-deaf podcast episode or a magazine cover framing the fellowship as her personal victory lap could dissolve these gains overnight. If Meghan's team can keep the cameras pointed at the filmmakers instead of the funder, this quiet initiative might evolve into a full-scale redemption narrative. For now, the world watches, not with applause, but with cautious, renewed curiosity. Still, goodwill is earned slowly and lost quickly. Any misstep, a self-congratulatory podcast episode, a tone-deaf photo shoot, could reset the scoreboard to 0. To thrive, Meghan must lean into long games. Projects measured in community impact, not trending hashtags. Narratives where her presence is a footnote, not the title. That shift won't guarantee instant redemption, but it can replace cynicism with curiosity, the first prerequisite for a comeback. When a primetime cartoon punches holes in your persona and the public nods in agreement, denial is no longer an option. Meghan Markle's fall from media darling to cautionary tale offers a universal lesson. Authenticity isn't a marketing strategy you can switch on when convenient. It's a marathon of consistent humility, willingness to evolve, and an openness to let the story be bigger than yourself. The next chapter is hers to author, but this time, the world will read past the prologue before deciding whether to stay for the ending.